It is day 59 and Nancy Guthrie is still missing. Today, analytical topography points to a single blind spot in the residential security grid. A reputed hidden route behind the neighboring property is now reportedly the focal point of this massive investigation. Investigators are mapping the precise physical dimensions of this alleged escape path through the terrain. The Catalina Foothills neighborhood operates under a dense blanket of municipal and private surveillance infrastructure. Every intersection and driveway features high-definition recording equipment, constantly uploading data to cloud servers. Yet an 84-year-old woman with severe mobility issues vanished completely into the dark. She left behind her vital daily medications and her personal identification materials inside the house. She departed the residence wearing only her sleepwear without securing any footwear for the harsh terrain. The logistical reality of moving an adult human body through this specific environment requires meticulous planning. It demands an encyclopedic knowledge of local wireless network blind spots and camera viewing angles. Law enforcement agencies face a chilling digital void across their primary evidence-gathering electronic streams. Authorities possess zero visual confirmation of the perpetrator entering or exiting the primary property perimeter. The suspect bypassed multiple motion sensors without triggering a single physical or digital perimeter alarm. This level of ghosting indicates a highly sophisticated intrusion protocol rather than a random home invasion. We must ask how an intruder extracts a vulnerable target through a fortified, affluent community. They achieved this without generating a single pixel of evidence across dozens of independent camera systems. If you want to look past the headlines and examine the real evidence, hit subscribe to join Evidence with John. We analyze the forensic data strictly by the numbers without relying on any emotional speculation. The public narrative focuses heavily on the high-profile nature of the victim's immediate family members. The media fixates on the emotional devastation surrounding the sudden and currently unexplained nocturnal disappearance. We will bypass the sensationalism to dissect the physical evidence left behind at the crime scene. The architecture of this crime reveals a chilling level of premeditation and advanced situational awareness. The perpetrator understood the exact layout of the electronic security perimeter surrounding the target property. They knew precisely which digital tripwires to neutralize before making their physical entry into the home. The geographical data suggests a highly calculated extraction route designed specifically to evade thermal imaging equipment. Every millimeter of the crime scene presents a paradox between physical reality and absolute digital silence. We are looking at a masterclass in forensic countermeasure and advanced electronic surveillance evasion tactics. The suspect left behind a scene that contradicts fundamental behavioral analysis of typical residential burglaries. This case challenges our core understanding of modern residential security systems and continuous electronic monitoring. We will break down the timeline minute by minute to expose the fatal perimeter security flaw. We must focus on the data points that cannot be manipulated by public relations media teams. The physical evidence will always dictate the true narrative of the ongoing criminal investigation timeline. The digital footprint, or absolute lack thereof, provides the most compelling blueprint of the suspect's methodology. Let us establish the baseline forensic timeline for the quiet night of January 31st. Tommaso Cioni drove his mother-in-law home and ensured she was safely inside the residence. Surveillance data confirms the primary garage door closed securely at exactly 9:50 in the evening. Law enforcement officials have officially cleared Cioni of any involvement in this ongoing missing person investigation. He is no longer considered a person of interest by the lead criminal case investigators. Nancy Guthrie was highly dependent on a specific and rigid regimen of essential daily medication. She also required continuous physiological monitoring via an implanted electronic cardiovascular pacemaker medical device. Her medical vulnerability severely limited her physical mobility and her overall cardiovascular physical stamina. The following afternoon, family members contacted authorities when they could not establish communication with responding deputies discovered the rear door of the main residence wide open to the external elements. Crime scene technicians immediately identified visible blood spatter near the entry point and inside the hallway. DNA analysis conclusively matched this recovered biological evidence directly to the missing elderly woman. Her smartwatch and emergency medical supplies remained completely untouched on the central kitchen counter. The physical scene indicated a sudden and chaotic departure from the secured residential interior perimeter. Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed the presence of blood and officially classified the event as an abduction. The classification shifted the resource allocation from a standard missing person search to a federal kidnapping protocol. The initial sweep of the immediate vicinity yielded absolutely no secondary locations of forensic interest. Investigators cataloged every undisturbed item to establish the precise baseline of the original domestic environment. The juxtaposition of the undisturbed valuables against the violent entry point creates a complex behavioral profile. The blood evidence suggests a physical altercation occurred near the primary point of forced entry. Yet, the digital timeline presents a completely different forensic narrative of that exact same night. The technological footprint of the house indicates a quiet and systematically executed electronic security breach. The perpetrator manipulated the digital environment long before initiating any physical contact with the main residence. The conflict between the violent physical scene and the surgical digital intrusion is deeply and fundamentally jarring. The physical evidence screams of a violent struggle and a rapid, disorganized external extraction process. The digital evidence whispers of a calculated infiltration executed with terrifying and absolute technical precision. This fundamental contradiction is the core anomaly driving the entire course of the current federal investigation. We must resolve this specific forensic paradox to understand the true sequence of physical events. The ultimate answer lies not in the physical blood, but in the chilling digital data silence. We must analyze the geographical anomalies defining the primary crime scene perimeter. Law enforcement faces a significant topographical challenge in the Catalina Foothills environment. The terrain consists of elevated ridges and deeply shadowed natural desert ravines. Private security networks heavily monitor the paved access roads and main residential driveways. However, a spatial analysis reportedly reveals a critical vulnerability in the localized security grid. Investigators are reportedly mapping a highly specific hidden route behind the neighboring property. This theoretical pathway represents a microscopic blind spot in the overlapping exterior camera arcs. The existence of such a route requires extreme local geographical and architectural knowledge. Navigating this narrow corridor demands precise physical movement outside standard illumination safety zones. The perpetrator reportedly utilized this environmental anomaly to bypass the digital surveillance dragnet. We are looking at an extraction vector totally devoid of active electronic monitoring. The physical execution of traversing this specific terrain presents massive logistical human hurdles. Moving a physically compromised 84-year-old victim across uneven ground is incredibly difficult. Doing so without artificial light and without generating significant noise is nearly an impossible task. The uneven terrain dictates a slow and incredibly precarious physical human extraction process. The suspect had to manage the victim while maintaining total environmental situational awareness. This level of environmental exploitation goes far beyond a standard opportunistic crime of opportunity. It represents a systematic analytical deconstruction of the entire neighborhood security surveillance infrastructure. The perpetrator identified the precise millimeter where multiple camera viewing angles failed to intersect. They plotted a physical trajectory through the only invisible corridor remaining in the affluent subdivision. The mathematical calculation required to find this absolute blind spot is genuinely staggering. The suspect had to account for infrared thermal sensors and motion-activated security floodlights. They mapped the precise activation radius of every individual security device on the residential block. The resulting theoretical escape path is the only logical explanation for the complete digital silence. We must consider the immense preliminary preparation required to identify this specific geographical loophole. The suspect needed to conduct extensive nocturnal surveillance to mathematically verify the security blind spot. They had to test the boundaries of the digital grid without triggering a centralized perimeter alarm. The architectural design of the affluent community creates these unintentional but severe environmental shadows. High perimeter walls and dense decorative vegetation provide necessary physical cover for a calculated intrusion. The reported hidden route exploits these exact landscaping features to perfectly mask physical human movement. The suspect weaponized the neighborhood aesthetic landscaping against the advanced digital security technology. This specific physical pathway completely neutralizes millions of dollars of private electronic surveillance equipment. The physical evidence of this route remains the subject of intense ongoing forensic analytical scrutiny. Investigators are actively searching for microbotanical evidence along this theoretical geographic extraction vector. They are looking for disturbed desert vegetation or microscopic fabric transfers on the landscaping elements. The sheer physical complexity of navigating this unlit path with a captive is deeply terrifying. The suspect maintained absolute physical control over the environment and the elderly victim simultaneously. The geographical data points heavily toward an individual with advanced tactical physical infiltration training. The topography alone dictates the required operational skill level of the currently unknown perpetrator. We are analyzing a criminal methodology defined by extreme environmental and architectural exploitation. The theorized hidden route is not just a path, but a calculated tactical structural advantage. It is the physical manifestation of a meticulously designed electronic and geographical evasion strategy. If the suspect knew this specific geographic vulnerability, they possess terrifying operational foresight. We must determine the exact duration of the preliminary neighborhood surveillance data gathering phase. The identification of this invisible corridor required hundreds of hours of dedicated visual observation. The perpetrator watched the neighborhood until they understood the digital rhythms and patrols perfectly. They learned the precise timing of private security vehicle patrols and local residential traffic patterns. The calculation of this extraction vector demands a chilling level of operational patience and discipline. How much time did the suspect spend in the shadows planning this perfect physical abduction? The physical geography only explains a fraction of this highly complex criminal mathematical equation. The internal digital timeline completely shatters any remaining theories of a random opportunistic property crime. We must analyze the precise sequence of electronic device failures inside the primary residential structure. The digital forensics reveal a terrifying escalation of technological interference during the early morning hours. At exactly 1:47 in the morning, the front doorbell security camera disconnected entirely. The surveillance system did not simply lose power, but was actively severed from the wireless network. This localized electronic blackout initiated the first critical active phase of the internal criminal timeline. The suspect blinded the primary frontal access point before attempting any physical entry into the home. The disconnection represents a highly targeted digital strike against the central hub of the home network. The tarred digital video silence lasted for exactly 41 agonizing minutes of completely undocumented physical activity. During this critical window, the physical abduction of Nancy Guthrie occurred without any visual video documentation. We must focus our analytical attention on the specific digital events that concluded this silent period. At precisely 2:28 in the morning, a second severe digital network anomaly registered. The victim's implanted cardiovascular pacemaker medical device completely severed its localized wireless transmission connection. The internal medical device utilizes low-energy Bluetooth technology to synchronize data with a local cellular phone. The medical application on her smartphone recorded the exact millisecond the biological telemetry data stopped transmitting. The sudden cessation of this medical telemetry is the most critical digital forensic evidence currently available. The technological architecture of a modern implanted pacemaker relies on a very strict physical proximity radius. The Bluetooth signal generally requires the paired smartphone to remain within 30 feet of the patient. The sudden loss of connection at 2:28 presents two distinct and terrifying forensic possibilities. The first operational possibility is that the victim was physically transported past the 30-foot boundary limit. The perpetrator carried her completely out of the Bluetooth receiving range of her charging cellular device. This spatial scenario establishes 2:28 as the exact precise moment she exited the property perimeter. The suspect managed to navigate the physical extraction and the hidden route by this precise temporal marker. The secondary technical possibility regarding the telemetry failure is significantly more grim and foreboding for investigators. The medical application requires continuous cardiovascular electrical activity to transmit functional biological health data. The sudden drop in Bluetooth communication could indicate a catastrophic physiological cardiovascular event inside the victim. The digital application log does not differentiate between spatial geographical distance and absolute cardiovascular physical failure. The raw data only confirms that the smartphone permanently stopped receiving the heartbeat telemetry transmission protocol. We are analyzing a digital artifact that could represent the exact precise moment of physical external extraction. Conversely, it could represent the exact moment the elderly victim suffered a fatal medical biological crisis. The federal investigators must rely on the manufacturer internal diagnostic logs to differentiate between these two scenarios. The technical forensic analysis of the pacemaker data is a highly specialized and complex digital discipline. The device internal memory might contain the ultimate definitive answer regarding her final known physiological status. The suspect created a 41-minute window of absolute digital darkness to operate physically within. The front door camera going offline was the calculated technological preamble to the physical residential intrusion. The pacemaker disconnecting was the chilling technological conclusion to the physical abduction sequence inside the house. The timeline between 147 and 228 dictates the entire physical forensic investigation. The suspect executed a complex home invasion and human extraction in exactly under 1 operational hour. They bypassed the external grid and neutralized the internal digital monitoring systems practically flawlessly. The level of technical sophistication required to manipulate both distinct systems is deeply and fundamentally alarming. The perpetrator understood exactly how to silence the environmental perimeter and the personal biological security technology. They isolated the victim from both visual electronic surveillance and critical medical cardiovascular telemetry monitoring. The digital evidence paints a picture of a suspect completely in control of the technological environment. The forensic analysis must bridge the gap between the disabled network camera and the silenced internal pacemaker. We are looking at a targeted criminal operation designed to erase a human being digitally and physically. If you want to analyze the ongoing forensic data with us, hit subscribe to join Evidence with John. We will continue to track the digital and physical breadcrumbs left behind by this sophisticated, unknown perpetrator. The electronic chronological timeline provides the only objective truth in this deeply convoluted, ongoing missing person investigation. The physical blood evidence implies chaos, while the digital timeline proves cold and calculated operational precision. The suspect orchestrated the technological network failures to mask the physical violence occurring inside the primary residence. The 41-minute temporal gap between the camera and the pacemaker remains the core investigative mystery. The investigators must reconstruct every single physical action that occurred during that specific narrow temporal window. The digital footprint stops completely and permanently after the medical device registered the final localized network connection. The suspect and the victim vanished into the geographical topographical blind spot under the cover of absolute darkness. The entire federal investigation heavily hinges on interpreting the final data packet sent to the local smartphone. The technical analysts are currently attempting to extract the final diagnostic failure codes from the secure cloud servers. The medical telemetry data holds the absolute key to understanding the physical condition of the abducted elderly victim. The exact technical nature of the localized connection failure remains the most closely guarded secret of the federal investigation. The absolute digital silence following that specific recorded millisecond is the loudest forensic evidence in the entire case. We must understand exactly what the technological failure data signifies regarding her physical location or biological status. What truly caused the medical telemetry application to go completely dark at exactly 2:28 in the morning? 2 miles away from the residence, investigators located a crucial piece of physical evidence. A single discarded glove rested near a secondary roadway leading away from the affluent subdivision. According to the Associated Press, crime scene technicians immediately secured the item for testing. This specific geographical location represents the first tangible forensic breadcrumb outside the surveillance blackout. The discovery contradicts the meticulous operational discipline demonstrated during the initial residential infiltration. A suspect capable of mapping a flawless security blind spot rarely leaves physical material behind. We must question if the item was accidentally dropped or intentionally staged to misdirect investigators. Laboratory analysts successfully extracted a viable deoxyribonucleic acid profile from the interior fabric. The biological material definitively did not belong to the missing elderly woman or her relatives. Investigators submitted the genetic sequence to the federal database expecting an immediate identification. The system returned absolutely zero matching profiles for known criminal offenders across the national registry. This negative result forces the forensic team to pivot toward highly advanced genetic genealogy techniques. Law enforcement agencies frequently utilize public ancestry databases to build complex familial trees. The process requires isolating specific chromosomal markers to identify distant relatives of the unknown suspect. Analysts map these genetic connections to eventually triangulate the exact identity of the perpetrator. The procedure demands significant computational resources and extensive chronological investment to yield a viable suspect. The genealogy technicians isolate single nucleotide polymorphisms to identify exact familial inheritance patterns across multiple generations. This highly specialized biological mapping requires comparing the unknown sample against millions of voluntarily submitted profiles. The ethical and legal parameters surrounding the usage of commercial genetic databases remain heavily regulated. Investigators must navigate complex privacy protocols before utilizing the familial matches to locate the primary suspect. The presence of the glove introduces a massive operational flaw into an otherwise surgically executed abduction. The perpetrator maintained complete control over the digital environment but failed to sanitize their exit. This single microscopic cellular error provides the federal task force with their most promising lead. The genetic material represents an undeniable biological signature connecting an unknown individual to the crime. We must examine the specific environmental conditions surrounding the precise recovery location of the glove. The item endured exposure to the harsh desert climate before evidence collection teams secured it. Forensic protocols dictate strict temperature controls to preserve the integrity of the extracted cellular material. The laboratory environment operates under extreme analytical scrutiny to prevent any potential microscopic cross-contamination. The genetic genealogy process bypasses traditional criminal databases to leverage expansive commercial genealogical data repositories. Investigators construct sprawling pedigrees using publicly available census records and open-source vital statistics databases. The methodology methodically narrows the suspect pool by eliminating genetic branches lacking the geographical identifiers. The investigators cross-reference the familial DNA matches with the known timeline of the abduction. This analytical convergence of biology and public records creates a formidable investigative net. The unknown perpetrator currently remains completely oblivious to the silent biological manhunt slowly closing in. The genetic sequence exists as an immutable mathematical fact, patiently waiting for a corresponding name. The technological gap between a discarded textile and a definitive suspect identification is rapidly closing. The federal agents understand that this specific biological sample is the absolute investigative key. The suspect meticulously avoided generating a digital footprint but ultimately surrendered their fundamental biological code. The forensic reality is that the genetic timeline operates independently from the missing pacemaker telemetry. The biological evidence demands a completely different analytical framework than the severed electronic security network. The genetic genealogy timeline operates on a scale of weeks rather than minutes. The investigators must carefully manage public expectations regarding the speed of the complex sequencing process. The biological evidence processing time cannot be artificially accelerated despite the critical urgency of the case. Every passing day without a genetic match increases the statistical probability of a deeply tragic resolution. The suspect currently benefits from the immense chronological delay inherent in advanced forensic biological data sequencing. The scientific reality of building a genetic profile from a degraded sample requires methodical patience. The laboratory technicians isolate the specific alleles necessary to construct a legally defensible identifying profile. The suspect relies on the anonymity of the desert night, while the scientists rely on genetics. The biological evidence will eventually betray the identity of the individual who breached the perimeter. We must continue to evaluate the physical evidence against the backdrop of the digital vacuum. The discarded glove represents a fundamental breakdown in the operational security of the otherwise flawless suspect. The suspect possesses no prior felony convictions requiring mandatory DNA submission to the federal registry. This clean criminal history aligns perfectly with the advanced technical sophistication demonstrated during the infiltration. A seasoned career criminal typically lacks the specialized knowledge required to neutralize medical telemetry systems. The unknown perpetrator represents a completely different classification of offender operating outside traditional law enforcement profiles. The individual demonstrates a terrifying amalgamation of tactical physical discipline and advanced surveillance evasion capabilities. The discovery of the biological material 2 miles away creates a distinct secondary geographical zone. The diff extraction route logically connects the silent Catalina Foothills residence to the specific glove location. Investigators must analyze every traffic intersection and commercial surveillance camera between those two geographical coordinates. The physical extraction route ending at the discarded glove location demands a secondary spatial analytical review. The suspect required vehicular transport to move the abducted octogenarian safely away from the perimeter. The glove location potentially indicates the precise transfer point from a pedestrian extraction to vehicular transit. This transfer occurred rapidly following the final medical telemetry transmission at 2:28. The physical logistics of loading an immobilized captive into a vehicle present another operational vulnerability. The suspect had to execute this maneuver while actively avoiding random nocturnal civilian or police traffic. The discarded physical evidence provides a crucial geographical vector pointing directly away from the subdivision. The forensic team meticulously catalogs the specific brand and physical wear patterns of the glove. The material composition might indicate specialized professional utility rather than standard civilian recreational winter apparel. Every microscopic fiber presents a potential data point leading toward the ultimate identification of the suspect. The physical artifact completely grounds the highly theoretical digital investigation into a tangible physical reality. The federal database failure ironically provides critical behavioral insight regarding the criminal history of the perpetrator. The absence of a prior criminal record suggests a highly functioning individual operating within normal society. This individual planned a complex extraction without generating any previous red flags within the judicial system. The investigators must construct a psychological profile of an invisible entity possessing highly specialized technical skills. The genetic map provides the biological coordinates, while the digital silence provides the psychological framework. The intersection of these two distinct forensic disciplines will ultimately define the trajectory of the investigation. The forensic complexity deepens significantly when analyzing the alleged communications received following the initial abduction. According to CBS News, the family reportedly received a digital extortion demand utilizing cryptocurrency transaction protocols. The anonymous correspondent specifically demanded a substantial financial transfer using the decentralized and untraceable Bitcoin network. The digital message reportedly contained highly specific details regarding the exact sleepwear worn by the victim. This specific clothing information was not released to the general public during the initial press briefing. The inclusion of this non-public detail strongly suggests the author possesses direct operational knowledge. However, the extortion demand contains a massive structural flaw typical of traditional financial kidnapping scenarios. The anonymous perpetrators failed to provide any verifiable proof of life regarding the missing elderly woman. A standard kidnapping operation relies entirely on demonstrating the physical well-being of the captive human asset. The complete absence of current physiological confirmation severely undermines the fundamental premise of a financial extortion. The perpetrators demand untraceable digital currency but refuse to validate the current biological status. This Critical operational omission forces investigators to evaluate the true underlying motive of the violent invasion. The communication might represent a calculated misdirection tactic designed to distract the primary federal investigative team. A staged financial extortion effectively consumes massive federal resources tracking anonymous digital cryptocurrency transaction ledgers. The digital extortion demands a deep forensic review of the decentralized blockchain transaction verification ledger systems. Federal cybercrime units specialize in tracking illicit financial movements across these theoretically anonymous global cryptocurrency networks. The perpetrators must utilize digital wallets and encrypted exchanges to eventually convert the cryptocurrency into fiat. This inevitable financial conversion process creates a vulnerable digital intersection that investigators can actively monitor. The investigators must determine if the message originates from the actual intruder or an opportunistic predator. The specific syntax and vocabulary utilized in the ransom correspondence undergo intensive forensic linguistic behavioral analysis. Analysts search for regional dialects or grammatical structures that might betray the origin of the author. The linguistic profile must carefully align with the advanced technical capabilities demonstrated during the physical abduction. A sophisticated cybercriminal might intentionally utilize altered linguistic patterns to further obscure their true geographical location. The digital nature of the communication perfectly mirrors the advanced technological evasion demonstrated at the scene. The suspect manipulated the localized wireless network and now utilizes encrypted, global, decentralized financial transaction networks. The investigative team faces an adversary highly proficient in exploiting modern digital infrastructure for criminal concealment. The absence of physiological proof of life dictates a shift in the primary federal investigative strategy. The negotiating parameters change fundamentally when the perpetrators cannot demonstrate the biological viability of the captive. The federal agents cannot authorize massive financial transfers without absolute verification of the hostage's current status. The extortionists must understand this fundamental negotiation protocol, yet they continue to withhold the critical verification. This operational stubbornness strongly supports the theory that the extortion is a secondary post-incident deception. The primary objective remains locating the biological asset while simultaneously tracking the phantom digital currency demands. The extortion demand severely complicates the analysis of the physical evidence recovered from the primary residence. The violent blood spatter and the forcefully opened rear door contradict the precision of a kidnapping. A professional extraction designed for financial leverage generally prioritizes maintaining the physical integrity of the asset. The violent physical struggle indicated by the biological evidence at the doorway presents a stark paradox. The perpetrator neutralized the frontal security cameras surgically but engaged in a chaotic physical external exit. If you want to dissect these contradictory forensic variables, hit subscribe to join Evidence with John. We analyze every conflicting data point to build a comprehensive analytical profile of the ongoing investigation. The juxtaposition of a violent physical struggle and a sophisticated digital extortion creates a terrifying valley. The suspect demonstrates the capacity for both blunt physical trauma and advanced cryptographic digital communication protocols. The entire sequence of events defies standard criminal categorization and frustrates traditional law enforcement profiling techniques. The missing medical telemetry data assumes a much darker significance in this specific analytical context. The lack of proof of life combined with violent biological evidence points toward a fatal outcome. The extortion demand might serve as a temporary operational shield to delay the inevitable homicide investigation. The perpetrators buy critical geographical distance while the federal agents trace the digital currency. The structural anomalies of the crime scene indicate a highly fluid and potentially disastrous physical execution. The initial infiltration plan clearly fractured when the suspect encountered the victim near the residential exit. The resulting physical altercation generated the biological sixth evidence and forced an accelerated and disorganized external extraction. The suspect abandoned the digital stealth protocol and resorted to physical force to secure the target. The open rear door stands as a physical monument to the chaotic conclusion of the intrusion. The digital silence of the camera system masked the violent reality unfolding at the property boundary. The investigators must reconcile the brilliant technological preparation with the violently messy physical execution. The extortion message simply adds another layer of encrypted complexity to an already convoluted forensic puzzle. The federal agents are simultaneously hunting a biological phantom and chasing untraceable digital cryptocurrency transactions. The dual nature of this investigation requires an unprecedented level of interagency cooperation and technical analysis. The suspect operates confidently within the physical shadows of the desert and the encrypted blockchain networks. The contradiction between the physical violence and the digital sophistication defines the core of this case. The ultimate resolution requires breaking either the biological genetic sequence or the encrypted digital financial ledger. The tension between the technological perfection and the physical chaos creates an incredibly volatile investigative environment. We must determine if the bloody scene represents a fatal mistake or another calculated misdirection tactic. The entire analytical framework prepares us to confront the most plausible operational theory, constructed from evidence. The synthesis of the physical and digital evidence constructs a highly specific behavioral and operational profile. The suspect is not a random burglar seeking opportunistic financial gain from an unsecured residential property. The data dictates a meticulously planned operation executed by an individual possessing advanced technical and physical capabilities. The perpetrator demonstrated an intimate understanding of modern decentralized residential security network architecture. Disabling a localized doorbell camera without triggering a system-wide diagnostic alert requires specialized administrative knowledge. The suspect successfully bypassed the primary digital perimeter without alerting the centralized private security monitoring station. This level of cyber infiltration suggests professional experience with low-voltage electronic surveillance installations. Investigators must consider the terrifying possibility that the suspect utilized legitimate occupational access for reconnaissance. Did a routine service call or contractor visit provide the necessary topographical and digital intelligence? The suspect mapped the precise viewing angles and wireless frequencies of the Catalina Foothills residential grid. They correlated this digital data with the physical anomaly of the reported hidden extraction route. The intersection of these two distinct datasets forms the core of the current federal working hypothesis. The physical execution of the abduction requires an entirely different set of highly specialized operational skills. The suspect extracted an 84-year-old woman suffering from severe mobility issues in complete darkness. The physical logistics of moving an incapacitated adult across uneven desert terrain are monumentally difficult. The perpetrator managed this extraction without generating sufficient noise to alert neighboring properties or canine security. The suspect demonstrated exceptional physical conditioning and absolute psychological control under extreme operational stress. The combination of advanced digital hacking capabilities and a highly disciplined physical tactical movement is extremely rare. This specific skill matrix narrows the potential suspect pool down to a microscopic statistical fraction. The investigators are undoubtedly running cross-departmental analyses on individuals possessing both military and technical backgrounds. The hypothesis suggests a solitary operator who methodically stalked the perimeter for an extended period. The perpetrator learned the exact latency of the neighborhood private security patrols before initiating the breach. They understood precisely how long the 41-minute digital blackout would effectively shield their physical movements. The suspect utilized the residential security infrastructure as a weapon to mask their own internal activities. The operational profile points toward a predator who viewed the affluent community as a tactical puzzle. We must ask whether this individual is a highly trained specialist or a dangerous technological savant. The sheer competence demonstrated during the infiltration terrifies veteran law enforcement behavioral science analysts. The suspect created a forensic vacuum that continues to baffle the primary investigative federal task force. If you want to follow the evolution of this criminal profile, hit subscribe to join Evidence with John. We will update the parameters as the genetic genealogy process refines the highly complex search matrix. The theoretical profile remains incredibly potent but fundamentally limited without a confirmed microscopic genetic match. Investigators are hunting a conceptual ghost constructed entirely from negative physical space and digital silence. The operational model provides a structural framework, but the suspect remains perfectly anonymous and currently free. The adrenaline of the theoretical reconstruction eventually fades into the cold reality of the ongoing manhunt. The analytical reconstruction ultimately crashes into the static reality of the present investigative moment. The case currently exists in a state of suspended forensic animation while awaiting laboratory analysis. The federal task force maintains a strict operational silence regarding the ongoing genetic sequencing progress. This strategic media blackout serves a dual purpose in high-stakes active missing person investigations. The administrative silence either protects an imminent suspect apprehension or masks a devastating lack of actionable intelligence. The public remains entirely detached from the microscopic biological battle occurring inside the secure federal laboratories. The entire momentum of the case now depends entirely on the processing speed of genetic algorithms. The physical search parameters have exhausted the immediate geographical radius surrounding the affluent subdivision. Tactical teams have demobilized and transferred the primary investigative burden to the scientific forensic technicians. The transition from a physical manhunt to a localized laboratory analysis represents a deeply frustrating phase. The initial sense of extreme urgency slowly morphs into a prolonged and agonizing period of scientific waiting. The critical digital timeline remains permanently frozen at exactly 2:28 in the morning. The physical evidence continues to present deeply unsettling questions that lack any definitive scientific resolution. The biological spatter recovered from the rear doorway demands a rigorous and final forensic interpretation. We must determine if the DNA evidence signifies a violent physical struggle against a conscious attacker. Alternatively, the blood could represent a catastrophic physical accident during the rapid and disorganized extraction process. Moving an immobile individual through a structural threshold in complete darkness carries extreme physical logistical risks. Forensic technicians must analyze the specific velocity and angle of the blood droplets to ascertain the truth. The geometrical patterns of the dried biological material will eventually dictate the exact nature of the trauma. The difference between a defensive struggle and an extraction injury completely alters the legal homicide classification. The theoretical suspect profile provides absolutely no comfort to the family waiting for any definitive news. Advanced technological analysis cannot replace the fundamental human need for physical confirmation of her location. The most terrifying aspect of this ongoing investigation is the sheer vastness of the surrounding desert terrain. The geographical reality offers millions of acres of potential concealment for an individual possessing extreme operational discipline. The suspects successfully navigated the most densely monitored residential grid in the county without leaving visual traces. The probability of them leaving a visible physical marker in the open wilderness is statistically minimal. The case rests entirely on the microscopic cellular material recovered from a discarded piece of winter apparel. The genetic genealogy databases hold the only viable key to unlocking the identity of the digital phantom. Investigators are meticulously scanning ancestral trees, hoping for a single corresponding genetic chromosomal marker. The computational process is a biological lottery, where the ultimate prize is the true identity. The current status of the investigation is defined by an agonizing and profound lack of closure. The physical house remains a sterile crime scene, preserving the final moments of a shattered domestic routine. The unused medical supplies sit silently on the counter, serving as a grim reminder of the abduction. Federal cyber agents continue to monitor the decentralized cryptocurrency networks for any digital financial movement. The alleged extortionists maintain their silence and actively refuse to provide the necessary biological verification of life. The dual investigations into the physical biology and the digital currency run parallel without ever intersecting. The suspect managed to create a perfect physical void where a human being used to exist. Cold, analytical data cannot quantify the psychological terror of a person vanishing from their own secured home. The timeline stopped weeks ago, but the geographical and digital search protocols continue relentlessly. Forensic reality dictates that cases of this specific operational complexity rarely resolve quickly or cleanly. Investigators are preparing for a protracted scientific and technological battle against an unseen adversary. The technological infrastructure failed to protect the victim, but the biological science might eventually secure justice. We are left analyzing the remnants of a perfectly executed nightmare while waiting for the laboratory results. Two most critical questions continue to echo through the empty corridors of the entire forensic timeline. What truly caused the blood spatter to mark the final physical exit point of the main residence? And where exactly is Nancy Guthrie currently located within the vast expanse of the physical world? What this case teaches us about the fragility of smart home ecosystems is deeply alarming. The modern residential security paradigm relies almost exclusively on continuous wireless local area network connectivity. Homeowners invest massive financial resources into overlapping high-definition exterior cameras and motion tracking sensors. They construct a formidable visual perimeter, assuming the digital infrastructure remains fundamentally secure and uncompromised. This investigation demonstrates the catastrophic vulnerability inherent in centralized commercial wireless router electronic configurations. A sophisticated perpetrator easily bypasses exterior hardware by surgically severing the central digital transmission protocol. The resulting data blackout completely blinds the physical property without physically destroying a single camera. The suspect effectively neutralized thousands of dollars in surveillance equipment through a single network manipulation. Furthermore, the incident exposes the severe operational limitations of medical Internet of Things telemetry devices. The cardiovascular pacemaker relied on a fragile Bluetooth handshake to communicate critical biological patient data. Once the physical distance exceeded the technological limitations, the medical monitoring system failed completely immediately. The architecture of these devices prioritizes battery conservation over extending the active wireless transmission range. Individuals must critically evaluate the default security settings governing their entire domestic digital device ecosystem. Implementing secondary cellular backup systems for critical perimeter surveillance hardware is a fundamental modern necessity. The primary network failure should automatically trigger an independent cellular alert to external monitoring services. Relying solely on aesthetic landscaping and neighborhood patrol vehicles provides only a dangerous illusion of safety. Affluent communities often confuse geographic isolation and expensive hardware with genuine tactical residential perimeter security. The geographic features designed for visual privacy simultaneously create perfect topographical shields for criminal infiltration. A meticulously planned intrusion weaponizes the architectural environment against the passive digital security monitoring grid. The suspect understood that the dense vegetation provided excellent cover from the automated motion floodlights. Understanding these systemic vulnerabilities is the only method to prevent similar sophisticated digital perimeter breaches. We must analyze the specific intersection between the disabled network and the physical property layout. The architectural design of the Catalina Foothills facilitated the exact concealment the perpetrator desperately required. We must return to the spatial anomaly of the reported hidden geographical extraction route now. The exact physical path through the neighboring property remains a terrifying testament to extreme premeditation. The perpetrator calculated the precise millimeter where the electronic surveillance grid fundamentally failed to overlap. This geographical blind spot facilitated an extraction that continues to baffle federal law enforcement agencies. The suspect exploited the physical terrain to completely bypass the remaining operational independent camera systems. We will cover every forensic development as the DNA results come in to this channel. The genetic material recovered from the discarded glove holds the ultimate key to suspect identification. The laboratory analysis represents the final scientific frontier in a case defined by digital evasion. The federal task force operates under immense pressure to definitively match that isolated biological sequence. The public must maintain vigilant awareness while the federal investigators process the complex biological data. Law enforcement urgently requires citizens to report any suspicious technical or physical activity within neighborhoods. The sheer technical competence demonstrated by the unknown suspect presents an ongoing threat to the community. Every technological failure and physical discrepancy points back to that single critical moment of disconnection. The telemetry logs preserve the exact millisecond the victim vanished from the electronic monitoring grid. The entire narrative of this abduction remains suspended in a state of absolute forensic uncertainty. The physical evidence hints at extreme violence, while the digital evidence indicates cold operational perfection. The resolution relies entirely on the successful identification of the individual who crossed that perimeter. Somewhere, a DNA sequence is being processed by highly specialized federal genetic laboratory, forensic technicians, and until it matches a name, the timeline stops at exactly 2:28 a.m.